joining us right now, very good friend of ours. He's an expert in all things China policy. He's an expert in foreign policy anyway. He's worked in previous presidential administrations. Stephen Yates, who's a senior fellow at the American First Policy Institute, and he's the chair of the China Policy Initiative. He joins us. We do miss the Lego bunker. We're always happy to see him on Mondays. It's good to see you. My first question right out of the gate, and I happened to be, well, there were a couple of things that I was reading about this move from China to now boost their military budget. And they are boosting it by about $230 billion this year. They had a big meeting. Defense expenditures going to increase by over 7%. And that's ahead of the 5.7% increase in the general public expenditure. I was looking at how much of their GDP that they're spending on their military, and I was comparing it to what NATO members would spend and even what members of Five Eyes spend on their military budgets. And I have to say, I'm a little bit concerned. What does that move by their government mean to you?
Well, it's pretty clear indication of what their priorities are. Of course, their statistics are a fiction, so at best we sort of are looking for trend lines. But if what they're declaring is an accurate trend line, and I think it probably is, in the wake of the most catastrophic shutdowns their country has experienced in 2 generations, they're accelerating by monumental terms their expenditures on military. For what? Who's attacking China? Who's invading China? Who's sending a virus into China? Who's taking their territory? What exactly are they, air quotes, defending against? This very obviously is building up for which country in the world? It's not building up to push away intruding Europe. It's not going to push away bad Vlad. He's on the receiving end of asking them for help. It's not going to push away Iran. They're not doing anything to destabilize China. It's all obviously aimed at a very distracted and demoralized America. And so it should be sobering for us. We shouldn't have to carry the lion's share around the world, but we should at least be making sure that we're ready if this Winnie the Pooh commie bear is coming for us.
What would, when we're talking with our friend Stephen Yates, you can follow him on Twitter at YatesComms. What would they be waiting for to do? I mean, obviously, we've talked about this many times on the program. They believe that Taiwan is, part of them. They, obviously really believe that having a military presence there will solidify that and also send the message to elsewhere in the world that, because we've been operating on this real vague, this vague policy where we kind of acknowledge it, but we don't really explicitly state it as it relates to any kind of Taiwanese independence. What are they waiting for? What would they accomplish that would be the signal to the United States that, okay, it's about ready to pop off?
Well, number one, when I was young and impressionable, there were some luminaries in the foreign policy and defense field that said, one of the reasons why President Reagan built up such a strong national defense was that so that others wouldn't dare challenge us. It wasn't that he wanted to go to war stomping around the world. It was so that people would listen to what we said our interests were, and they wouldn't feel like they were in a position to challenge us. And if they wanted to change things, they would understand, well, this is non-negotiable, so we're just going to wait. And so China is flipping the script in a way. We can hope that they're not looking to come at America head to head. And I don't think that that would be a rational option for them to take on. But they would, I think, like to present themselves as so big and so bad that we're just going to have to accept their terms, at least in Asia and maybe in other parts of the world. And so it's to be so big as to have a deterrent effect against us trying to stop them or help our allies block their expansionism of authoritarianism in Asia.
Yeah, well, this definitely increasing their budget definitely seems to be in that direction. Of course, they also had a big meeting with their CCP. They were changing out some of their, it was like a musical chairs a bit with some of their leadership. What does that signify?
Well, this is part of the Commie China 101 for a lot of people who have a significant excuse not to have paid attention. But in this non-democracy, in the fall of every 4 years, they have, or every 5 years, I should say, they have a party Congress where real power is decided. And then 6 months later, they have a People's Congress where the government positions get shuffled according to what the party decided 6 months ago. So we just had that 6-month echo effect. So the people who have the titular leadership roles in charge of ministries, the economy, other kinds of civilian positions in air quotes, because they're all Communist Party positions. They got some shuffling. So the outgoing premier, who had been in charge of the economy and running the state government, got swapped out. And part of his farewell was to announce some of these increases in spending and the reframed priorities that Xi Jinping had put in place. And so what we have is more demonstrable personnel power demonstrated by Xi Jinping. He is in charge of today's China. I think it's not credible for someone to say, well, he's got the balanced forces and he has to watch out for his military. I think he's greased anybody that wants to challenge him.
That's the
and
line.
so that's
He's
pretty
greased
much
any
he's
challenge.
okay.
Wow. We're talking with our
He's
friend
okay.
Stephen Yates at Yatescoms on Twitter with the American First Policy Institute. China's not going to arm Russia, are they? Or are they already and we are just kind of overlooking it?
My view is, and my friend Gordon Chang says the same thing on the air, that they have been all along. It's really just a matter of what exactly they've been sharing. And when you're sharing materials and capital and other things, that's what fancy people would say is fungible. It can change into other things. So you give them an asset in one category, but they swap it into something that's used against Ukraine. Did they help Russia against Ukraine? Well, yes, they did. And so that's been happening now for a year. But they're talking about real military equipment changing hands. And my colleague, General Kellogg, warns that this year is actually quite decisive because if this becomes a long-term war of attrition, Ukraine's going to lose. And so the challenge for the West is, are they going to help Ukraine stop Putin in his tracks and maybe stop Putin? But if that's going to happen, Europe's going to have to pull its head out from its long-term slumber. They got to step up. They got to do what the Chinese are doing and spend more on defense for themselves and their neighbors. If they don't do that, I don't like our odds there.
Yeah, I don't like those odds either. Speaking of Europe, the German chancellor said Sunday that China's declared it's not going to provide Russia with any kind of weapons for war. He says that they've received some assurances from Beijing. Do we actually trust Olaf Scholz to be able to deliver a promise like that?
Yeah, well, there's a long history of people saying, oh, this is never going to happen. I even remember a famous diplomat writing a memo the day before Saddam invaded Kuwait saying it's never going to happen. So color me skeptical that someone putting together a diplomatic note saying, don't worry about this, that everything's going to go okay. And when it comes to Putin, Xi Jinping, the mullahs in Iran, lots of other bad actors around the world, they don't really feel the need to tell us what they're going to do. And yet they indicate pretty clearly they don't like us. In fact, they hate us. And if we give them any opportunity, they're coming for us. So we should just bake that into the cake.
Yeah, there you go. Stephen Yates, as always, stuff to keep our eye on. And we love that you break it down for us so well. Always so good to see you. Follow him on Yates on Twitter at Yatescoms. Good to see you. And if you're in Dallas, holler at us because we'll go talk. We were just talking about that.
I hope to do that soon. That would be awesome. My wife, Michelle, says hello.
Yeah, well, tell her we said hello, too. Good to see you. Take care.